Story 1. A bit of necessary background. This happened in 2003. I work in the insurance industry, in a not-so-well-known profession related to audits. I got my start working for a small company founded by my uncle, and I was with him for about 10 years. My uncle then decided it was time to build his dream home and move, which meant I had to either take over the company or find a new job. I didn't want to spend half my day chasing down invoices, so I decided to start a job search. He agreed to give me some time to find a position before shutting things down. There are two types of positions in my field. You either work for a vendor, which is an independent service provider, or directly for an insurance company. Openings at insurance companies don't come around that often, and vendors don't have the best reputations, so they're basically employers of last resort. That concludes the background now. On to the story. Over the course of about 3 weeks, I applied for 2 positions at different insurance companies. I was quickly notified that I didn't get one job, while the second kept saying, "We'll get back to you." Not wanting to hold my uncle up, I bit the bullet and applied to the largest vendor in the country. The day of my interview, I met with the on-site manager, a lovely lady who seemed to be a bit in over her head. It just so happened that her boss, the district manager, and his boss, the regional manager, were also in the office that day and sat in on the interview. It went well. I filled out some paperwork, we shook hands, and I left. I didn't hear anything from them for about a week. During that time, I finally got a call back from the other insurance company, which, at the time, was the largest in the world. They offered me a position, went over the details, set a start date, and I accepted. The following Monday, around 10 a.m., my phone rang. I answered, and it was the lady I had interviewed with at the vendor, who I'll now refer to as Vendor Lady or VL. VL: "Hi, we were expecting you this morning. Is there a problem?" Me: Pardon?" VL: "Today was supposed to be your first day, and we thought you would be here at 9 o'clock. Me: "Why would you think that?" VL: "That's what our records show." Me with absolutely no irony: "I don't work for you, lady. I never heard from you after the interview. No one called to offer me a position or discuss salary, much less a start date." VL stammering: "Oh, I had no idea. I'll take care of it, and sorry about that." Me: "Thanks, and have a good day, I guess." But that wasn't the end of the story. The following Wednesday, which was payday for the job I had at the time, I logged into my bank account and saw an automatic deposit from the vendor. I stared at the screen for a good 5 minutes, trying to figure out what on earth was going on. Then it hit me: I was going to have to call VL. Me: "Hi, VL. You might remember me from the mix-up where you thought I was supposed to work for you, but I don't. Why did I receive a paycheck from your company?" VL: "That doesn't sound right. Let me check." She placed me on hold for a few minutes, then came back and said, "Well, it looks like since you filled out all the required paperwork during the interview with your application, you were accidentally placed on payroll as well. What you can do is just write us a check for the payroll amount, and that should take care of it." Me struggling to comprehend how absurd this situation was. "Listen, VL, I review payroll records for a living, so I'm well aware that you can simply have your payroll department reverse the paycheck. That will zero out any payroll taxes you paid and any that were withheld, as well as reclaim the small amount deposited into my bank account. So no, I won't be writing you a check and paying you for not working for you." The week after that, I started work at the large insurance company, and, ironically, within 6 months, both the district manager joined as a co-worker of mine, and the regional manager joined a related department. No clue what happened to VL, but good luck to anyone working for her. Edit: Thanks for all the support. I'll try to answer some common questions. It wasn't a scam. That vendor company is still around today, still the employer of last resort, and unfortunately still the largest independent service provider in my industry. I filled out all the paperwork required for direct deposit because I was told it was necessary to streamline the hiring process. I definitely did not supply them with a voided check. Also, they did reverse the direct deposit, and I never heard from VL again, though I did receive periodic emails over the next few years asking if I was interested in doing some work for them. Lastly, the large insurance company I ended up working for was indeed run by Hank Greenberg. I left after 2 years for a better position, about a year and a half before the big financial crash. Story 2. Let me give you some background. My husband and I have been married for 5 years now. He's got this obsession with breakfast bars. I mean, the man could live off them if I let him. Every morning, it's the same routine, coffee and his favorite breakfast bar. It's cute, really, how such a small thing can make him so happy. Anyway, we were running low on his beloved bars, so I decided to make a quick run to the warehouse store. It was a busy Saturday afternoon, and the place was packed. I grabbed a few other essentials along with a big box of the breakfast bars and headed to the checkout. Now, here's where things got interesting. I was standing in line, minding my own business, when this woman, let's call her Karen because, well, you'll see why, approached me. She asked about the bars in my cart, and I explained they were breakfast bars, my husband's favorite. When she inquired if they were good, I told her that my husband loves them, and I think they're pretty tasty too. Karen then said she thought she'd get some and asked where they were. As I started to explain the location, she suddenly interrupted me. To my shock, she declared that since I knew where the bars were, she'd just take the ones from my cart, and I could go get some more. I was sure I had misheard her, so I asked her to repeat what she'd said. Karen reiterated her intention to take the bars from my cart, suggesting I go get another box. I firmly refused, telling her she wasn't taking my bars as they were in my cart and I was about to check out. Just then, an employee came over to start scanning items. Karen turned to her with a smile, announcing that she was getting these breakfast bars. I quickly corrected her, stating that the bars were mine. The employee offered to show Karen where to find the bars in the store, but Karen insisted on taking the ones from my cart. To my disbelief, Karen actually stomped her foot like a toddler throwing a tantrum. The employee patiently explained that the items were already in my cart and I was checking out. She offered to have someone take Karen to where she could get her own box. Karen complained loudly about the situation, calling it ridiculous and asserting her status as a paying customer. The employee called over another worker to escort Karen to the breakfast bar aisle. As they walked away, I could hear Karen complaining about the terrible customer service and threatening to speak to a manager. The employee apologized for the incident, and I assured her it wasn't her fault, praising her for handling the situation well. I made sure to get the employee's name so I could leave a positive review later. As I finished checking out, I saw Karen storming towards the exit, empty-handed. Curious, I asked the cashier what had happened. The cashier explained that Karen had forgotten her membership card and didn't want to pay the non-member fee, making a huge fuss about it. I left the store, feeling a sense of karmic justice. Near the exit, I saw Karen arguing with a manager. Our eyes met briefly, and I couldn't resist smiling and waving, patting the box of breakfast bars in my cart. The look on her face was priceless, a mix of anger and embarrassment. When I got home and recounted the adventure to my husband, he couldn't stop laughing. He jokingly suggested we should start buying 2 boxes at a time, just in case we encounter another Karen. I rolled my eyes but agreed, acknowledging that you never know when you might run into an entitled person who thinks your shopping cart is their personal shopping aisle. As I put away the groceries, I felt grateful for my level-headed husband, helpful store employees, and even for Karen. She had given me a story I'd be telling at dinner parties for years to come. Now, every time my husband enjoys his breakfast bar, we share a knowing smile, remembering the day we almost lost them to the breakfast bar bandit. Story 3. I rented a small house from a man who owned a painting business. The power was off when we came to view the property, but he assured us everything worked, and even included it in the contract. The place was dirty and poorly maintained, so we negotiated the security deposit down to $300. It turned out that the heating and air conditioning system didn't work, along with the refrigerator and dishwasher. I asked him to have someone inspect them. He responded with a string of insults. He called and left threatening voicemails. He would show up unannounced and let himself in. During one of these visits, I showed him that the crawl space was flooded and had become a breeding ground for thousands, if not millions, of cockroaches and mosquitoes that would come up through the floor vents. There was absolutely no ductwork, even though he claimed the heating and air conditioning worked fine. He accused me of causing the flood myself, even though I showed him the source was a pipe that had rusted through. He refused to address any problems and said, "If you don't like it, then you can move. You can't pay for a bargain and expect to live in luxury." This man was generally terrible. Once, he hired someone from an online classified ad to cut down a tree in the rental property's yard. The man worked literally all day for the agreed $150, cut up and hauled off the tree. He returned that evening, just standing in the yard. I asked if I could help him. He said he was waiting for the owner to get paid. The owner kept replying, saying he was on the way but never showed up. Our neighbor told us he had punched the previous renter in the face and refused to pay him for a day's work for his company. He had bragged about renting to undocumented immigrants and not having to do anything because they wouldn't sue. We had a newborn baby, so we called his bluff and agreed to find a new place to live. We left the home in much better condition than we found it. He said he would mail us the security deposit, but never did. He dodged my phone calls until one day he called to say, "You aren't getting it back. You broke the contract when you left early, so go away." I was really upset because we were new parents and had very little money. That $300 was a big deal to us and a drop in the bucket for this man. He owned an upscale painting business and had 15 rental properties. The following week, I was online leaving negative reviews for his business when I clicked a link and noticed his website's domain had just expired. I knew what I had to do. I immediately bought it, then created a homepage with contact information for his biggest competitor. I emailed him from his old domain, asking him if he wanted to buy the website for $320, the cost of the security deposit plus the price I paid for the domain. He was furious. He started calling my workplace, threatening to sue my employer. He even contacted my parents and threatened to sue them. He left numerous threatening voicemails for me, saying he was going to harm me physically and that he knows where I live and has my social security number. I received emails from several review sites asking if I was trying to update the contact information for the business. He must have used his old domain's email as his contact email. I didn't want to get in trouble for impersonating his business, so I did not respond. The contact information was never changed. I received a few emails from potential clients. I called him and told him about the painting job requests. I gave him the contact information for one of the clients to prove I wasn't making it up. I told him it was the last time I was going to do that for him and suggested he buy the website back in order to not miss out on any other jobs. He told me he was taking me to court. I told him I had recorded his threatening phone calls and saved all his texts and voicemails. He said he was going to sue me for illegally recording him, which is not illegal in my state. I said, "I look forward to seeing you in court where I countersue and press charges for harassing me," and I hung up. He called back and berated me for hanging up on him. I said, "Call me back when you can speak respectfully to me," and hung up again. We repeated this about 5 times. Each time he became more angry until the last time. He spoke respectfully and explained he hadn't received a single job in months. I suggested he focus more on creating a website to find business. He lost his temper and berated me again. 6 months passed, and he still hadn't bought the website from me. I received a call from him, begging me to do the right thing and give him the website back. I told him the current price was $350. 6 months later, I received another phone call. I told him the current price was $380. Eventually, he texted me to say, "I went out of business. I hope you're happy." I responded, "I hear having a website really helps your business. $380 and it's yours." He told me what a terrible person I am and said, "Karma's not kind." I responded, "Maybe if you stop trying to take advantage of people, Your karma wouldn't be so bad. That was the last time I ever heard from him. The major business listing sites confirmed his business did indeed close. I renewed the domain for another 2 years just in case he was bluffing. A few months later, I drove by his office to see if it was still there. It was empty with a "For Rent" sign posted. I never got that $300 back and spent money on domain registrations, but it was totally worth it. Story 4. My husband and I had been trying for a baby for years. We went through fertility treatments, experienced heartbreaking losses, and finally, miraculously, I got pregnant. Every day of this pregnancy has been precious to me, but it hasn't been easy. The morning sickness was brutal, and now in my 3rd trimester, I'm constantly exhausted and achy. Yesterday, I needed to grab some groceries from the local supermarket. My husband usually does the shopping, but he's been working overtime to save up for my maternity leave. So, there I was, waddling into the parking lot, looking forward to using one of those expectant mothers' parking spaces. As I drove in, I noticed a shiny Lexus ahead of me. To my dismay, it pulled into one of the expectant mother's spots. I sighed, figuring it must be another pregnant woman, and found a space a few spots down. By the time I got out of my car, the Lexus driver was already heading towards the store. She was a well-dressed woman in her mid-60s, definitely not pregnant. When she saw me struggling to get out of my car, she had the audacity to laugh. The Lexus lady then said something that sounded like an apology, but her tone was far from apologetic. It was more like she found the whole situation amusing. Maybe it was the hormones, maybe it was the weeks of discomfort, but something in me snapped. I responded, telling her that she obviously wasn't sorry since she had parked in a spot she shouldn't have. I didn't yell, but my voice was firm. I expected her to be embarrassed, maybe even offer to move her car. Instead, her face contorted with rage. She marched right up to me, getting so close I could smell her expensive perfume. The Lexus lady then shouted at me, using a swear word and telling me that I wasn't entitled to the spot. Her sudden aggression caught me off guard. I felt my eyes well up with tears. I hated crying in public, but I couldn't help it. The stress of the pregnancy, the confrontation, it was all too much. Just as I thought things couldn't get any worse, I heard a deep voice behind me. A tall man in his 40s, who I'll call the hero bystander, told the Lexus lady to back off. He asked her what was wrong with her for yelling at a pregnant woman like that. I turned to see the hero bystander glaring at the Lexus lady. He wasn't alone. About 4 other people had gathered around, all looking disgusted at the woman's behavior. Another bystander joined in, telling the Lexus lady that she should be ashamed of herself, and that the parking spot was clearly meant for me, not her. The Lexus lady tried to defend herself, telling everyone to mind their own business and that she could park wherever she wanted. The hero bystander disagreed, telling her that's not how it works. He called her out on her behavior, even using a term often used to describe entitled women. The woman's face turned an impressive shade of red. She opened her mouth to argue, but the crowd of disapproving faces seemed to finally get through to her. Without another word, she stormed back to her car and peeled out of the parking lot. The hero bystander turned to me, his face softening. He asked if I was okay and told me not to let people like that get to me. He reassured me that I had every right to use that parking spot. I nodded, wiping away my tears, and thanked all of them, expressing how much I appreciated their help. Another bystander offered to help me with my shopping, but I politely declined. As I walked into the store, I felt a mix of emotions. I was still shaken by the confrontation, but I also felt a warmth in my chest. The kindness of strangers had turned an awful situation into a reminder that there are good people in the world. As I shopped, I couldn't help but smile, thinking about how I'd tell this story to my baby someday. I'd tell them about the day their mommy stood up to a bully, and how a group of strangers came to her rescue. I'd tell them that for every mean person out there, there are many more kind ones. When I got home and told my husband what happened, he was furious at first. But as I described how the bystanders rallied around me, he began to laugh. He said he wished he could have seen the look on that woman's face when they called her out, and bet that she wouldn't be parking in those spots again anytime soon. I had to agree. Sometimes, public shame is the best teacher for entitled behavior. As for me, I learned that day that I'm stronger than I thought, and that even in the face of rudeness and aggression, there's always hope for human kindness to prevail. Story 5. Back when I was still in university, I used to work for a hotel to make ends meet. When I started, the hotel urgently needed new personnel. So, I negotiated a deal with the old owner about getting to choose and pick shifts, allowing me to attend my courses and exams. Speaking some additional foreign languages, I also received a small bonus each month. The old owner was a great person. He owned multiple hotels, so I rarely saw him. But when he was in the house, he always made a point to have drinks with the staff, chat with us, and if we were free, he even invited those of us from the front desk who were not on shift to fancy restaurants. Fast forward a few years, and I was nearing the completion of my studies. It wouldn't have been long until I had to quit anyway, as I was more interested in working in my field of study. As part of my agreement with the old owner, I mostly chose to work night shifts, allowing me to attend my university courses during the day. To make up for my privileges, I had developed the habit of doing some extra work during the quiet hours of the night that other shifts would normally have to do. In contrast, I could have simply sat around doing nothing. People were grateful for the help in the beginning, and we became a rather close-knit group. But over time, people came and went. When the old owner retired and his unpleasant son took over the business as the new owner, I already feared the worst. The new owner didn't like me very much, though I never discovered the exact reason. At that point, I was nearly the sole veteran left from when I started. Among the tasks I had taken on was doing light clerical work to ease the manager's job in the morning. For that, I generally had to use the manager's network account. One night, while working on my lists, I logged into the manager's account and emailed to do my job. Then I saw an email with my name in the subject line. I know it's not polite to snoop, but of course, I read it. It turned out the new owner wanted to get rid of me. I still had my old employee contract with the bonuses for foreign language abilities, and was allowed by my contract to pick and choose shifts. I can only assume these privileges are what made the new owner dislike me. I have no idea if he had other reasons, because, to be honest, these seem very weak to me. But he couldn't fire me without cause. Additionally, I would be owed severance if fired, and generally, there were not enough staff members in the shift rotation without me. Though the new owner didn't seem to understand that point, as the emails revealed. I looked for more emails concerning me and found them. There was an email chain between some of the employees, the manager, and the new owner. I was, of course, not copied on these emails as I was the disliked topic. The employees didn't like me monopolizing the night shifts because those paid better, and for every night you worked, you received the night bonus. The manager was the only one relatively neutral on the matter, and just curbed their enthusiasm to get rid of me, as they needed me to be fully staffed. The new owner and my colleagues actively conspired to create a hostile work environment, so I would quit of my own volition. I was furious. I considered a variety of reactions, from egging their cars to setting fire to the hotel. But I settled on a less extreme method of revenge. I called my uncle at 2 a.m. asking for advice. My uncle is a lawyer. For the sake of proof, I forwarded myself all the emails. I took photos, printed them out, made copies, and filmed the whole process just to be sure. My uncle advised me to wait and see if things worsened, or if it was just empty talk. So, I gave it a few days. And things did take a turn for the worse. Snide remarks about my appearance, clothing, and so on were only the tip of the iceberg. Some colleagues remained just as professional as before, but the conspirators always left extra work for me or pawned off unpleasant duties they normally had to do onto me. I always kept a spare shirt and suit at work, just to have a change, which suddenly disappeared. One individual even started to threaten me with violence. But I remained steadfast. I would not give them the satisfaction of saving on the severance or giving in. I am resilient, after all. I did, however, stop doing any extra work I was not obligated to do, which, in the end, was the reason they used to fire me. They still had to pay me severance. The next day, my uncle, armed with the compiled proof of the emails and all documented harassment by my colleagues, served the hotel my lawsuit. It started with wrongful termination and ended with harassment. Reportedly, the manager turned pale when he realized where the emails must have come from. The new owner had been on vacation and had to cancel his expensive trip to France to deal with this. Their legal counsel advised them to settle. So, I accepted my severance and a substantial bonus on top. It was enough money to sustain me until the end of university without work. But that was not the extent of my revenge. I had gone after the new owner's money. In the next step, I went after the hotel itself. I had used all the spare time during night shifts alone to document every last violation of city, county, district, state, and federal law I could find. That ranged from minor issues like some harmless mold under the kitchen sink to substantial violations like unauthorized modifications to the building. The building was under a limited form of historical protection by federal law, on the grounds of being built and inhabited by somewhat important historical figures a few hundred years ago. So, every renovation or change in floor plans needed to be approved by a committee, which can take ages. There is also a grant paid to the new owner by the government for maintaining the building's integrity. So, with my uncle's help, I sent documentation of every violation I could find to the corresponding agency. In 1 month, everything from health, building code, fire safety to the finance and labor authorities scrutinized the hotel. In the end, it was the building and fire inspectors who shut the place down. The new owner had made substantial renovations to the top-floor luxury apartments, which he used when he was in town. Consequently, the new owner had to repay the grant, pay fines for unauthorized alterations to the building, endangering his guests because something wasn't built correctly according to fire code, and had to close down operations until the building was fixed. I also tipped off a friend who had studied journalism and worked at a local paper. The paper ran an article on all the accumulated violations, which negatively impacted the business once it had reopened, as the newspaper article had led to terrible reviews. In the end, to afford all the fines, repayments, and building costs, the new owner sold the hotel. As the final blow, all the individuals who had tried to harass me out of my job lost their positions. Granted, the people who didn't do anything to me lost their jobs too. But they didn't do anything to stand up for me or help me either, so I don't feel too much remorse. The final act of retribution was related to the new owner's personal life. Whenever he was in town, he used to bring home companions of questionable repute. While this is not illegal in my country, he was married. It took some effort to get that information to the new owner's wife, but one of my former colleagues, who had quit before all this happened, had her email address, so I informed her about the new owner's activities when he was out of town. I don't know exactly what transpired, but they did divorce in the end. Make of that what you will. Story 6. It's been a while, but I never really told anyone, and it turns out I'm still kind of upset about it, so be warned it'll be a bit ranty. I was working short-term contracts via an agency at the time to experience different fields and earn some cash while I looked for something more permanent. I got this one contract at a health center. I showed up on my first day and had a hard time getting a hold of my new boss, so I just waited around awkwardly, asking around for her. When I finally met her, she was a stressed person, constantly walking and talking fast and barely listening. I asked what work I was supposed to do, but she said she had no time for me, so she gave me a stack of papers and asked me to make as many copies as possible. The social workers use them all the time, and we can literally never have too many. I didn't even have time to wonder if I had any questions before she was gone. The copies were bad, some were faded, and others were poorly cropped. I tracked down the originals or the earliest copies possible to improve the quality of the booklets as much as possible and made a ton of copies. It was mind-numbing work, and I was bored out of my mind. After over 60 hours of copying the same stuff, I was mentally exhausted and quite frankly miserable. The copies stacked up at first, but it turned out it was because the social workers did not know they could use them. They didn't want to steal someone else's stuff. So when I explained I was filling my time with that, while my real job was explained to me, and that these copies were free for all, they were ecstatic and grateful. The good news spread and lifted everyone's spirits, making my mental misery and countless paper cuts worthwhile. That ended when my boss finally took the time to explain the project she had actually hired me for. The health center wanted to maximize the use of the meeting rooms and needed me to watch how they were being used. She wanted to know when people got in and out of the rooms and what they were using them for. This was to track the downtimes and maybe even rent out some meeting rooms to outsiders. I asked how exactly I was supposed to do that since I couldn't be on 3 different floors at the same time and watch them from end to end among multiple corridors. She said she didn't know and to figure it out, and she ignored me and walked out on me. I was dumbfounded, but I complied. I honestly still have no idea how I was supposed to accomplish that. The best solution I found was to walk all the corridors in a loop. One loop took roughly 8 to 13 minutes 13 when I started, 8 as I built cardio and muscles. I took a few minutes breaks so each loop started every 20 minutes. That way, I'd have an idea of the room usage. I intended to eventually compile the information on the computer, likely my personal one since I had no equipment assigned to me. So for months, I walked. I was used to desk jobs. My feet at first were swollen and everything hurt. I was tired, dead tired, when I finished work. But that was actually the upside. I had never had such nice legs and booty. I became fitter and my pants looked really good on me. The downside was that it created a hostile work environment. The health workers using the rooms felt hawked and watched. To them, I was basically a spy for management. I had their names and activities with time logs and room numbers. You couldn't tell easily if a room was in use, so I literally had to bend over to see if there were feet inside via the non-glazed portions of the glass panes when there were any. I couldn't always tell who had used what room. It was awful. Everyone hated me. I became depressed. There was no one I could talk to. My boss basically ignored and avoided me, and she was my only point of contact. I tried to be friendly and nice, but I was still pretty much just hated. I made the mistake of reading an article on the Palestine and Israel conflict, something I knew little about at the time. Since I couldn't finish the article in one go, I left the newspaper open on that page while I hurried through my round, and when I came back, a doctor was upset and crying, saying something about how it was on purpose since the newspaper was open on that page. I have no idea why it was wrong to read a newspaper article, and I was already hated, so I just walked away bewildered. The following day, my only comfort at work disappeared. It was a tiny teaspoon beautifully decorated that had accompanied me throughout my university years. It was a source of comfort to me, like a teddy bear or a warm blanket in that cold place where I didn't belong and wasn't welcome. I was so upset. I literally made wanted lost posters and still, no one ever gave it back. I had foolishly run out of time after drinking my coffee and left it in my mug while I hurriedly made a round. In the few minutes I was gone, it had disappeared. Honestly, I missed being chained to the photocopy machine at that point. At least people actually appreciated what I did back then, and I was liked, not hated. Mercifully, I found a permanent job downtown with very good conditions, so I gave my notice, at which point my boss finally made time for me. I could almost swear she had been avoiding me until then, and any interaction was cut short by her mumbling something or other without paying attention to what I was saying and fast walking away. At this point, she asked to see what I'd done. I explained my reasoning and showed her my piles of data accumulated for almost 3 months by then. She was shocked. "This is useless," she said. I wanted to smirk. I wanted to roll my eyes. Honestly, what did she expect? She wasn't wrong, though. It was useless data. Columns and columns of data coded in simple letters and scribbled notes. Completely unreliable since even as I was taking the notes, I had no way of confirming if anyone was really in the room or not. "Well, this is the best I could do with the resources and guidance I was given," I said and shrugged. "Not my problem. Honestly, I just wanted out." She was shocked and angry, and I didn't care. I had been paid to walk 8 hours a day. My very presence made everyone hate management. I was never so happy to leave a job. Things were looking up. I never looked back. I still dislike that place. A social worker there stole my custom-ordered books from Japan. She never answered my calls when I tried to reach her about it. She had an address where she could drop them and multiple phone numbers she could use to reach me. All that information I had also taped inside the books. She just ignored me and kept them, even though she said she didn't like them. What on earth? I was young, naive, and I believed her to be trustworthy because of her job and the impression she gave off. Many regrets were had. My Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind collection remains pilfered to this day. But hey, got fit, got paid, and frustrated the hated management. I'd have left with my middle fingers held up if I didn't have a bunch of bags and a bus pass to carry.